Welcome to the Initial Configuration module, which provides a brief overview of the factory default configuration for platforms running the Junos OS and also explains how to perform initial configuration tasks. The module also discusses interface types and how to perform basic configuration tasks. When you power on a Junos device for the first time, the Junos OS automatically boots using a factory default configuration file. To enable device access over the network, you must enter basic configuration parameters. At the end of this module, you will be able to return a device running the Junos OS to its factory default state, perform initial configuration tasks, describe interface types, perform basic interface configuration tasks. All platforms running the Junos OS are shipped with a factory default configuration. All factory default configurations enable access using the root account. The root account does not include a password by default. Setting a root password is required before activating any changes to the configuration file. All factory default configurations also include system logging, which tracks system events and writes those events to predefined log files. Factory default configurations also contain additional parameters that are platform dependent. Click the Example button to view an example of a typical syslog configuration found within a factory default configuration. Factory default configurations can vary from one platform family to another, or even between different models within the same platform family. All platforms running the Junos OS are designed for specific roles within a network environment, and their factory default configurations are created with those specific roles in mind. Click the Example button to learn more about a factory default configuration. Under certain conditions, you might want to return a device running the Junos OS to its factory default configuration. You can overwrite the candidate configuration while in configuration mode using the Load Factory Default command. The Junos OS does not enable you to save the configuration until you configure root authentication information. Do not forget to issue a commit command to activate your changes. Always refer to your platform-specific documentation and follow the safety guidelines when connecting power and powering on your device running the Junos OS. Once a device running the Junos OS is powered on, and if the power to that system is interrupted, the device automatically powers on when the power is restored. In other words, no manual intervention is required for the system to reboot in this situation. The Junos OS is a multitasking environment. To ensure file system integrity, you should always gracefully shut down platforms running the Junos OS. Although unlikely, failure to gracefully shut down the system could possibly leave it unable to boot. Use the Request System Halt command to gracefully shut down the Junos OS. This command provides options that enable you to schedule the shutdown in a specified number of minutes or at an exact time, to specify the media which the next boot-up operation will use, and to log a message to the console and to the messages file. Click the Additional Information button to get additional details about the Request System Halt command. When you receive a device running the Junos OS from the factory, the Junos OS is pre-installed. Once you power on the device, it is ready to be configured. When the initial configuration is performed, the root authentication must be included. In addition to root authentication, it is also recommended that you configure these items: host name, system time, system services for remote access such as Telnet and SSH, and management interface and static route for management traffic. As shown in the example, the Junos OS enforces password restrictions. All passwords are required to be no less than 6 characters and must include a change of case, digits, or punctuation. Sample configuration syntax for the initial configuration tasks listed in the example will be covered later. As discussed earlier, platforms running the Junos OS are shipped with a factory default configuration. These steps should be performed to configure a Junos device. Log in as root. Start CLI. Enter configuration mode. Set identification parameters. Set time parameters. Set management access parameters. Set management network parameters. Activate configuration. Click each initial configuration setup step to know how it is performed. Use the Operational Mode Show Configuration command to display the hierarchical configuration file as created by the initial configuration set statements. Note, the complete configuration is not shown for the sake of brevity. A rescue configuration is a user-defined, known good configuration that is designed to restore connectivity in the event of configuration problems. It is recommended that the rescue configuration contain the minimum elements necessary to restore network connectivity. For added security, the rescue configuration must include a root password. By default, no rescue configuration is defined. You can save the active configuration as the rescue configuration using the CLI's Operational Mode Request System Configuration Rescue Save command. If a rescue configuration already exists, the Request System Configuration Rescue Save command replaces the rescue configuration file with the contents from the active configuration. To manually delete the current rescue configuration, issue the Request System Configuration Rescue Delete command. Once saved, you can load the rescue configuration by entering the Rollback Rescue Configuration Mode command. Because the rollback operation only replaces the contents of the candidate configuration, you must issue commit to activate the configuration. The Junos OS uses a standard naming convention. Most interfaces have names based on the interface media type, the system slot number in which the line card is installed, the line card slot number in which the interface card is installed, and the port number for the interface card. The CLI almost always refers to line cards as Flexible PIC Concentrators or FPCs, and interface cards as PICs. However, the actual names of these physical components may vary between Junos devices. Note, for platform-specific information, including details pertaining to the interface naming convention for your specific device, refer to the URL. In typical deployments, the slot and port numbering begins with 0 and increments based on the system hardware configuration. The example shows a sample interface name that illustrates the interface naming format. The highlighted interface name is for the 4th physical port, number 3, on a Gigabit Ethernet interface card installed in the 3rd slot, number 2, of a line card that resides on the 1st available line card slot, number 0, of a chassis. Other interface name designations exist that do not adhere to the naming convention discussed earlier. Interfaces with specific designations are created by the Junos OS and are not directly associated with or dependent on physical interfaces. Click the Example button to view examples of other naming conventions for interfaces and internally generated interfaces. Each physical interface descriptor can contain one or more logical interface descriptors. These descriptors allow you to map one or more logical interfaces, sometimes called virtual interfaces, to a single physical device. Logical units are similar to sub-interfaces used by other vendors. In the Junos OS, a logical unit is always required. Creating multiple logical interfaces is useful in environments where multiple virtual circuits or data link layer connections are associated with a single physical interface, such as in ATM and frame relay networks. Some encapsulations, such as the Point-to-Point Protocol, or PPP, and the Cisco High-Level Data Link Control, or Cisco HDLC protocol, support only a single logical interface, and its logical unit number must be 0. Other encapsulations, such as Frame Relay, ATM, and Tagged Ethernet, support multiple logical interfaces, which enables you to configure one or more logical unit numbers. The unit number and the circuit identifier are different in meaning. The circuit identifier identifies the logical tunnel or circuit, whereas the unit is used to identify a logical partition of the physical interface. Although not required, it is generally considered a best practice to keep the unit number and circuit identifier the same. This practice can greatly aid in troubleshooting when you have many logical circuits. Junos devices can have more than one address on a single logical interface. Issuing a second set command does not overwrite the previous address. It adds an additional address under the logical unit. The CLI's rename command is used to prevent this type of addressing mistake. This is an example. Note: the Junos OS forms Interior Gateway Protocol or IGP adjacencies over all subnets when the IGP is configured on a logical interface. This behavior is worth noting because some vendors' products form an adjacency over the primary address of an interface only. Watch for multiple addresses when correcting mistakes. All interfaces have the same configuration hierarchy organization. The Junos OS considers all properties defined directly under the interface name to be the physical properties of that interface. The unit number represents a particular logical interface or sub-interface. The Junos OS considers all properties defined directly under the unit number to be the logical properties of each particular sub-interface. There are two types of interface properties: physical properties and logical properties. Click each interface property to learn more. Let's take a look at a basic configuration example that includes multiple interfaces, multiple protocol families configured under a single logical unit, and multiple IP addresses configured for a single protocol family. While a single logical unit does support multiple protocol families, such as INET and INET 6, you cannot configure a second protocol family in conjunction with the Ethernet switching protocol family. The example illustrates this point. The example highlights the use of the preferred and primary configuration options. The preferred option is used when you have multiple IP addresses belonging to the same subnet on the same interface. This option enables you to select which address will be used as the source address for packets sent by the local system to hosts on the directly connected subnet. By default, the numerically lowest local address is chosen. In the example, the default behavior has been overridden with the preferred option to make 172.19.102.2/24 the preferred address. The primary address on an interface is the address that is used by default as the local address for broadcast and multicast packets sourced locally and sent out the interface. The primary address flag can also be useful for selecting the local address used for packets sent out unnumbered interfaces when multiple non-127 addresses are configured on the loopback interface LO0. By default, the primary address on an interface is selected as the numerically lowest local address configured on the interface. In the example, 172.19.102.1/24 is the primary address for the GE0/0/2.0 interface because it is the numerically lowest address configured on that interface. 192.168.200.1/32 is the primary address for the LO0.0 interfaces because it has the primary option. This example verifies the primary state. Note: interface support varies between Junos devices. Refer to the technical publications for detailed information for your specific product. To quickly verify the state of an interface, use the Show Interfaces Terse command. To filter the displayed output to an individual interface, add the name of the interface to the command. The sample output displays admin and link status, the protocol family details, and the address information for the specified interface.
Welcome to the lab section of the module.
This lab demonstrates tasks using both the CLI and the JWeb interfaces. Click this button to view a guided demonstration of the tasks performed in the Junos OS CLI interface. Click this button to view a guided demonstration of the tasks performed in the Junos OS JWeb interface.
Welcome to the Junos OS CLI lab. This lab demonstrates configuration tasks typically performed on new devices running Junos OS. In this lab, you use the CLI to perform the initial configuration and the basic interface configuration. At the end of this lab, you will be able to load a factory default configuration and perform initial system configuration tasks, save, delete, and restore a rescue configuration, perform basic interface configuration. Click Continue to begin the lab.
This lab consists of 3 parts. Click each part to view its guided demonstration.
Part 1. Loading a factory default configuration and performing initial configuration. In this lab part, you load the factory default configuration and perform the initial configuration tasks using the Junos CLI. Refer to the management network diagram to determine the management address of the VSRX1 device. Access the CLI of the VSRX1 device using the Virtual Console connection. Log in to the student device with lab as the username and lab123 as the password. Note that both the name and the password are case-sensitive. Enter the configuration mode and load a factory default configuration using the Load Factory Default command. Display the factory default configuration. Try to activate the factory default configuration by issuing the commit command. Navigate to the Edit System Root Authentication Hierarchy level. Issue the Set Plain Text Password command. When prompted to enter a new password, enter apples. Again, issue the Set Plain Text Password command. When prompted to enter a new password, enter apples. When prompted to confirm the password, enter oranges. Issue the Set Plain Text Password command once again. When prompted to enter a new password, enter root. When prompted to confirm the password, enter root. Before continuing to the next action, make sure you are accessing the device through the console and not through SSH, else you will lose connectivity to the system once the new configuration is committed. Move to the top of the configuration hierarchy by issuing the top command. Activate the changes and return to the operational mode by issuing the commit and quit command. If your communication session with the system was dropped after the commit, skip to Step 1.10. If you are still connected as lab user, issue the file list /var/temp command. Make sure you are using console access. Log out as the lab user and log in with root as the username. Use the newly defined password of root. Start the CLI with the CLI command and enter the configuration mode. Define the system's hostname. Use VSRX1 as the hostname. Configure the time zone in system time using the local time zone and the current date and time as input values. There are a number of formats available for time zone input. Commit the changes using the commit command. You can see what is available by entering the set system time zone ? command. Part 2. Saving, displaying, loading, and deleting a rescue configuration. In this lab part, you save, display, load, and delete a rescue configuration using the Junos CLI. Remain in the configuration mode and load the lab2 part 2 start.config file from the IJOS directory. This will return the lab to its original state and re-establish the lab user. After completing the changes, commit the configuration and return to the operational mode using the commit and quit command. Log out of the root user and log in as the lab user using lab123 as the password. Save the active configuration as the rescue configuration. Display the contents of the recently saved rescue configuration. Return to the configuration mode and delete the Edit System Services hierarchy level. Activate the changes using the commit command. Verify that the Edit System Services hierarchy level is empty, and then load the rescue configuration. Verify that the Edit System Services hierarchy level once again contains the SSH Telnet and Web Management Services. Activate the rescue configuration and return to the operational mode using the commit and quit command. Delete the rescue configuration and attempt to display the rescue.conf.gz file to confirm the deletion. Part 3. Configuring interfaces and verifying operational state. In this lab part, you perform interface configuration and verify the operational state of interfaces using the Junos CLI. Refer to the lab network diagram. Initial system configuration for this lab and configure the listed interfaces. Use logical unit 0 on all specified interfaces except for GE0/0/4, which is to be VLAN tagged. For this interface, use VLAN 300 tied to VLAN ID 300. After committing the configuration, return to the operational mode using the commit and quit command. Issue the show interfaces terse CLI command to verify the state of the configured interfaces. Log out of the assigned device using the exit command. Welcome to the Junos OS JWeb Lab. This lab demonstrates configuration tasks typically performed on new devices running Junos OS. In this lab, you use the JWeb interface to perform initial configuration and basic interface configuration. At the end of this lab, you will be able to load a factory default configuration and perform initial system configuration tasks, save, delete, and restore a rescue configuration, perform basic interface configuration. Click Continue to begin the lab. Part 1. loading a factory default configuration, and performing initial configuration. In this lab part, you load the factory default configuration using the Juno CLI and perform initial configuration tasks using the JWeb interface. Refer to the management network diagram to determine the management address of the VSRX1 device. Access the CLI to the VSRX using the Virtual Console connection. Log in to the VSRX1 device with lab as the username and lab123 as the password. Note that both the username and password are case-sensitive. Enter the configuration mode and load a factory default configuration using the Load Factory Default command. View the factory default configuration. Try to activate the factory default configuration by issuing the commit command. Navigate to the Edit System Root Authentication hierarchy level. Issue the Set Plaintext Password command. When prompted to enter a new password, type apples. Again, issue the Set Plaintext Password command. When prompted to enter a new password, type apples. When prompted to confirm the password, type oranges. Issue the Set Plaintext Password command once again. When prompted to enter a new password, type root. When prompted to confirm the password, type root. Activate the change and return to the operational mode by issuing the commit and quit command. If the communication session with the system was dropped after the commit, skip to the next step. If you are still connected as user lab, issue the filelist/var/tmp command. Here you are using console access. Log out as the lab user and log in as root. Use the newly defined password of root. Start the CLI with the CLI command and enter the configuration mode. Define the system's hostname. Use the hostname VSRX1. 13. Configure the time zone and system time, using the local time zone and current date and time as input values. There are a number of formats available for time zone input. You can see what is available by entering the Set System Time Zone ? Command. Part 2. Saving, displaying, loading, and deleting a rescue configuration. In this lab part, you save, display, load, and delete a rescue configuration using the JWeb interface. Remain in the configuration mode and load the lab2 part 2 start.config file from the IJOS directory. This returns the lab to its original state and reestablishes the lab user. Commit the configuration and return to the operational mode when complete. Log out of the root user. Open a web browser on the student desktop. Navigate to https://172.25.11.1. Log in with lab as the username and lab123 as the password, and click Login. Navigate to Administration, Devices, Config, Management, Rescue. Then save the active configuration as the rescue configuration. You can perform this action by completing the following substeps. Click Set Rescue Configuration. Click OK to confirm the operation. View the contents of the recently saved rescue configuration. You can perform this action by completing the following substeps. Click View Rescue Configuration. Examine the configuration. Navigate to Administration, Tools, CLI Editor. Delete the syslog hierarchy level. You can perform this action by completing the following substeps. Highlight the syslog stanza and delete it. Commit the changes when you have deleted the configuration. Confirm the commit. Navigate to Administration, Tools, CLI Viewer. Verify that the syslog hierarchy level is empty. Switch to the CLI of the VSRX1 device. Log in to the CLI of VSRX1 with lab as the username and lab123 as the password. Enter the configuration mode, load the rescue configuration. Commit the changes using the commit and quit command. Switch to the JWeb interface of the VSRX1 device. Navigate to Administration, Tools, CLI Viewer, and verify that the syslog stanza once again contains the deleted services. Navigate to Administration, Devices, Config Management, Rescue. Delete the rescue configuration and attempt to display the rescue file to confirm the deletion. You can perform these actions by completing the following sub-steps. Click Delete Rescue Configuration. Click OK to confirm. View the options in the Rescue menu. Part 3. Configuring interfaces and verifying operational state. In this lab part, you perform interface configuration and verify the operational state of interfaces using the JWeb interface. Refer to the lab network diagram and configure the listed interfaces. Use logical unit 0 on all specified interfaces except GE0/0/4, which is to be VLAN tagged. For this interface, use VLAN 300 tied to VLAN ID 300. Commit the configuration and return to the operational mode when complete. You can perform these actions by completing the following sub-steps. Navigate to Configure Interfaces Ports. Verify that the interfaces are filtered by the GE interface type. Select GE0/0/4 and click the Edit button. Select the Enable VLAN Tagging checkbox and click OK. Click Yes to confirm the warning message about deleting VLAN tagging. Select GE0/0/2 and click the Add button to add the logical interface. Specify 0 for the unit. Select the IPv4 address DHCP configuration checkbox in the IPv4 address tab and click the Add button. Specify the IP address and mask 172.20.77.1/30 and click OK. Repeat substeps 4 through 6 for the remaining GE interfaces. Assign the IP address and mask 172.20.66.1/30 to the GE0/0/3.0 interface and 172.18.1.2/30 to the GE0/0/4.0 interface. Refer to the lab network diagram as needed. Remember to specify 300 as the VLAN ID for the GE0/0/4 interface. Filter the interface type based on LO0 and click Go. Select the LO0 interface and click the Edit button. In the Logical Interfaces section, click Add. In the IPv4 addresses and prefixes section, click Add. Specify the IPv4 address and prefix as 192.168.1.1/32 and click OK. For the logical interface description, specify loopback for main routing instance of VSRX1 and click OK. Click OK on the Logical Interfaces section. Commit the configuration. Navigate to Configure, Interfaces, Ports. Examine the interface status for GE and LO0 ports. Log out of the JWeb of the assigned VSRX device. Switch to the CLI of the VSRX1 device. Log out of the assigned device using the exit command.
You have reached the end of this module. In this module, you learn to return a device running the Junos OS to its factory default state, perform initial configuration tasks, describe interface types, perform basic interface configuration tasks.